Hello, everyone, and welcome back to OneSoccer. I'm your host for today, Josh Deming, and I'm joined by my colleague Alex Gangue-Ruzic for a quick hits Canadians abroad episode. Hopefully, you guys are excited for this. There is some big storylines to touch on, and we will be starting with Alphonso Davies. It's being reported that Alphonso Davies will be out for around 6 weeks and will not feature for Bayern for the rest of the season. This is not great timing as Bayern are pushing for the Bundesliga title, and right now at the time of recording, the CONCACAF Nations League is around 7 weeks away. So Alex, the big question right now is, do you think Davies can be fit for this tournament?
It's going to be tight. It's going to be very tight. I think you look at that timeline, 6 weeks, something where also with hamstrings, you don't know how he's going to fully recover. You almost saw it at the World Cup where he was dealing with a similar issue and he was up in a race against time. And you could feel like there were moments in that World Cup where he wasn't fully 100%, even though he'd cleared all the tests. So it's one where ultimately with these sort of tissue injuries, we don't really know. But on the flip side, I think there could be a silver lining to this potentially, as tough as it is. One thing about a potential Nations League and Gold Cup playing in both is that you could lose your off season. Typically a lot of European seasons start in August. You start preseason in July, right when a Gold Cup would end. But now Alphonso Davies is about to get up to say he misses that last Bundesliga game, which is at end of May 27th, if I'm not mistaken. The Nations League starts in mid-June, June 15th. That would just casually give him 7 weeks off, which is about more than what you'd get for a normal off season, which is typically 4 to 6 weeks for most players. So of course he's out rehabbing, he's out injured, he's not out there on vacation getting full rest, but the fact that he could get these 6 to 7 weeks off, get a bit of a refresh after a long season, say recoveries ahead of schedule, he comes back just after that end of that Bundesliga game. That would still give him a couple weeks to get up to speed for Nations League. Maybe at Nations League he uses in slow. Maybe it's only 10-20 minutes off the bench against Panama. Canada hopefully gets the job done. Then he goes for a bigger role in the final and goes from there. But I think it's something where it's ultimately going to depend on what Bayern sees. Because on the one hand, Bayern can just be like, look, we just want to shut you down, get your 6 weeks plus no Canada duty, and you come back fresh next year. No hamstring issues, no nothing. Or they'll see the 6 to 8 weeks as like a potential off season, right? Because it's longer than a typical player off season. So I'm going to be curious how Bayern's doctors rate it. For the most part, they're very on point. They're very thorough with this sort of stuff. And if Davies is cleared by beginning of June, it's something where it could be a huge asset for Canada.
It could be. And I think back to the recent interview that John Herdman did where he talked about wanting to bring one squad to both tournaments. It's just the fact that he said that some players could need rest, some players could be injured, some players could get transfers, and Davies has been also linked with Manchester City, Real Madrid. Do you think one of those other circumstances could come into play? Because in my personal opinion, I think Alphonso Davies, when it comes to wanting to play for Canada, will always be up for the call.
Yeah, I think that's something where I don't think it's going to come down to Alphonso Davies. I think his stance has always been clear. This is someone who will play against the Cayman Islands or he'll play against Brazil. Like, no matter who you call him for, he'll want to be there. It's just going to come down to really contract situation. Like we've mentioned many times, this is a crucial summer, 2 years left in his deal. Will he extend? Will he go elsewhere? Et cetera. And you add in the injury, so Bayern will certainly be looking at that because they don't want to hurt an asset if they're thinking about potentially selling him. I think it's ultimately going to be Bayern's call, and because of that, it's interesting 6 weeks to see what happens with his recovery, if any transfer rumors pop up and anything of that like.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. Jonathan David scored once again over the weekend, stepping up and helping Lille pick up a 1-1 draw. It was another penalty, but David is up to 21 goals this season, only one behind Kylian Mbappe, and he's absolutely thriving this year. I did say at the beginning of the season that I didn't think there was a lot of options out there that would really suit him for a transfer, and I thought playing a season under Paulo Fonseca could really help him thrive and build his game. And this year, he featured as a lone striker in that 4-2-3-1 system for the majority of the season. And I'm wondering, Alex, if this growth with Jonathan David we've seen this season, the way he's scoring goals consistently, I might add, and on top of that, that he's thrived in this lone striker kind of role compared to a dual striker, do you think that could help potential options for bigger clubs to come circling for him? Because as we know, when he played in that dual striker, you just kind of think of clubs like Atletico Madrid, Inter Milan, Juventus. I really think of him playing this lone striker role could help him get a big move to like potentially at Bayern, Manchester, AC Milan. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this was a key season of growth for Jonathan David, and it was kind of the ascension he needed. Year one, he came in, new guy on the block, started slow, got the goals at the right time, right when Lille finished their title push, finishes the league and a champion. Then last year he comes flying out the gates, but then hits a bit of a wall. Still finishes with more goals, so that's improvement. But then you saw that big lull at the end of the year. You're like, okay, what's happening there? This year it's been perfect. It's been consistency. That's the big thing. There hasn't been any lulls. I think the biggest was like 3 to 4, maybe 5 games, but every time he's come back strong, managed to get in around the goals. And it's something where you look at the numbers and you look just the way he's been playing himself, a lot ticks boxes. I think the one thing too is he's quietly had 3 double-digit seasons in a top 5 league for strikers born after 2000. That really hasn't happened yet, other than Erling Haaland. Like, other than Erling Haaland, Jonathan David's pretty much, one of the next up in terms of the best 2000 born or later strikers. Even a guy like Dusan Vlahovic, he had a very great season, a year ago, but he doesn't have as many, or Jonathan David hit 3 double-digit goal seasons in a top 5 league before Vlahovic did. Just for some context, he was a huge sale to Juventus last summer. So I think overall, David's done a lot of good things in terms of the goal numbers, and then we've seen his play. He's just continued to improve his play. He's still the same free roaming, free wheeling number 9 that he is, but I think he's added a bit of maturity, a bit of just more number 9 activities into his game, so to speak. He's being a little more active in the box, working on his poaching. His off-ball runs have become very, very strong, and I think all those sorts of details the team will look like, oh, he can lead my front line and be that guy. But also, if teams like Bayern, teams who like to play a little more combination play, like, oh, he still kept and grew that side of his game too. So you're not getting just someone who is going to expect to get balls in the box. He'll go get the build up, go participate in it, and then go get on the end of some service.
We have some transfer news to discuss today, Alex, as TFC has announced that they have acquired experienced MLS forward CJ Sapong from Nashville in exchange for Lukas MacNaughton and up to $200,000 in general allocation money. This is not the first Canadian to leave TFC and join Nashville, as Jacob Schaffelberg did it in August of last year, and he's found some success there. Do you think that MacNaughton could replicate the type of success that Schaffelberg has and potentially get some more minutes to push for Canadian's national team spot?
Absolutely. I think it's something where among MLS fits, Lukas MacNaughton has gotten a very good home, especially for a center back. Nashville has always been defensively solid since they've come into MLS, really since 2020. They've been known for their defensive foundation led by Walker Zimmerman. They've just maybe struggled for a bit of stability besides Walker Zimmerman. But even despite that, whoever they've put in has seemed to thrive just because Zimmerman's a great defender. They've got a great system complete with midfield solidity, that number 6, the 8, something that TFC hasn't fully had either, which has put a lot of pressure on their center backs in games, which, maybe MacNaughton felt a bit lately, certainly, this season. So you look at Nashville, there's a lot to like. You look at how guys like Dave Romney, some of the, Nick Dupuis, Tyler Washington, some of these other guys who came around from MLS, maybe aren't the most well-known games, just slotted in beside Zimmerman and throve. I think a guy like MacNaughton could do that. He's, at Pacific, he was very good in the air when in a set back line. He could play with the ball at his feet and play out, which is something Nashville could use a bit more of. So it's something because of those attributes. I think he could slot in nicely, but beside a Zimmerman. And if he does and gets some good reps and Nashville pushes up the standings, of course you have to look at that from a Canadian national team perspective. All and any center backs are and will be looked at, especially Canada's actually a bit short on right-footed center backs. They're all seeming to be coming out lefties these days. So a guy like MacNaughton to push the Heberts, the Watermans, Daniel Henry when he's back fixed, he's been struggling with injury. Your Steven Vittorias, it would be good to add him to that group.
So, Alex, when we think of the last Canadian men's national team player standing in Europe, we probably would have thought it would have been Alphonso Davies, but it is Liam Millar, whose side Basel took out Nice in the Conference League quarterfinals to head to the semifinals. Liam Millar played well in the left wing-back role. How big could a performance like this and a run like this do for him to help him push for one of the 2 tournaments this summer?
Yeah, I think it's going to hopefully be a strong end to the year for Liam Millar. I think it's something where it's good to see the success Basel's had in the UEFA Conference League, pushing, making it this far in the semifinals. Of course, if they win, they can make Europa League straight up. That's something that's important because in the league they're currently like mid-table. It's very tight between second and mid-table, so there's a chance if they go on a hot run, they could also finish in a Champions League qualification spot because Switzerland got an extra spot for next year in the qualifiers. But I think overall, in terms of Millar's perspective, it's been good, and he's been growing into his new role at wingback. It's not something he's used to. It's maybe not something that fully suited him at first, but he's adjusted a lot defensively, and he's continuing to get forward and go at defenders. And I think it's something where it's going to add versatility to his game. There's been a lot of instability at Basel. They've had like 3 coaches in the last year. So, say one comes in, maybe moves him higher up the field, at least he'll know he'll have this defensive responsibility, which wasn't always there before. He was more freewheeling, just be a winger, focus on your goals, your assists, and let the rest figure itself out. I think he's added a bit of defensive maturity to his game, which long-term, can't be a bad thing no matter where he ends up. If it's, Basel next year, if they're in Europa League, if they make Champions League qualifiers, if they're back in the Conference League, hopefully Millar can push and maybe just be in around the goals and assists again last year with this newfound defensive identity.
It was quite the milestone weekend for Cloe Lacasse, who scored her 100th goal from Benfica and put them just 1 point away from winning the league for the 3rd consecutive time. She had 2 goals, 2 assists. She's on absolute fire this season. Alex, could she be a starter for the Canadian women's national team at the upcoming World Cup?
Yeah, I think it's something where you have to look at it as a possibility. I mean, just look at her Benfica form. It's outrageous. I mean, she scored 3 20-goal seasons, her first 3 seasons there. But she's just gone absolute supernova this year. 33 goals in all competitions. Add in like a dozen assists. She's almost pushing for 50 goal contributions, which for a forward is great. For a winger is just outstanding. And what's key with Lacasse is early on in her Benfica career, especially because the Portuguese league's playing a lot of catch-up, there's some validity to be asked. Okay, how legitimate are these? She's scoring a lot of goals, but how does it compare to playing in England? How does it compare to playing in Sweden, Italy, France, some of these other leagues? The comparison wasn't really there. But what's nice about Lacasse's run is that she had a chance to prove it this year in Champions League for Benfica. And they got a tough group. They got Bayern, always a tough team, and they got Barcelona, the juggernauts. Lacasse still scored against every team in her group, including Barcelona and Bayern Munich. And currently, despite, as of us recording, is still second in the overall Champions League Golden Boot race with 7. She hasn't played since the group stages because Benfica got eliminated. The tournament's now in the semifinals. I think for me, that was a huge proof that her numbers could translate over to playing for Canada, because you look at Canada, she's played over 20 games, has just 1 goal. But if you look at the minutes, she's only played around 700 minutes, which is the equivalent of around 8 full games. She's never played more than 65 minutes in a game. I think it's something where you gotta put her on the wing and let her just try and replicate what she has at Benfica, because she has not had that opportunity with Canada. And you look at the winger depth right now, no Janine Becky, Nichelle Prince, and Deanne Rose are playing a race against time to get back fully fit. Canada doesn't have a litany, so to speak, of wide options. It'll be interesting to see what a Lacasse can do with the Adriana Leon on one side and then an Eveline Vian or Jordan Houdema leading the line, because those are some pretty informed forwards. Yet despite that, we haven't seen any of them play together, which I think shows that Canada has a solution there waiting to be tried if they want more goals for the World Cup. So hopefully Lacasse can get a run in the group stages, maybe find a goal or 2, and then maybe hit the ground running as the bigger games come along.
Jayden Nelson picked up his first goal contribution since joining Rosenborg, where he had a nice assist. He's starting to build a little bit of steam in Europe so far. Alice, could it be enough to help him find a spot in the Nations League or potentially even the Gold Cup?
Yeah, sure. I think he's someone who's maybe flying a bit under the radar. He made that move to Rosenborg, and there, he's kind of slowly eased his way into the squad, but he's certainly getting up to speed now. And you look at Canada's winger depth, isn't the deepest. Of course, you see some of the top end names, and you see a lot of flash. But beyond that, we've seen that there's a race for spots. There's a reason why guys like Luka Kolyosha, Theo Corbianu have had looks, even despite not maybe fully having embedded in at their clubs, over recent months or the past year. And you add that Nelson played a lot at the 8 last year. Canada doesn't have depth at the 8. I think it's something where his versatility, again, Herdman will look at that. Herdman has been a big fan of the player. I think just the way he works, the way he grows, the way he absorbs his knowledge. I think it's something where you look at potential Gold Cup, even Nations League options if injuries arise. Nelson should 100% be looked at if he keeps this up.
That is all the time we have for in this edition of Canadians Abroad. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to tune in for next week's update.